Thanksgiving at the office was my mother's favorite performance. Linen napkins, corporate donors, and a speech about family. This year, she invited everyone, the entire company, our cousins, her new husband's bridge club, everyone but me. What she didn't know was that I handle risk for a living. I don't argue with doors that shut. I buy the building and change the locks. My name is Avery Cole. I am 32 years old, and I am the Director of Ethics and Risk for Hearthline Nutrition. I am also the daughter of its CEO, Miriam Cole. These two facts are rarely compatible. Today, they became mutually exclusive. The email arrived at 4:02 p.m. on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. The subject line glowed on my secondary monitor, the one linked to a mirrored inbox I'd set up 3 years ago, a simple risk mitigation tool. The primary inbox, the one Miriam's assistant managed, would remain pointedly empty. Subject: Thanksgiving at Gullhaven Hall. We are family. It was CC'd to every full-time employee, every part-time contractor, the board of directors, and a long, baffling list of external partners: sales, marketing, legal, warehouse logistics, even the landscaping crew, everyone. I scrolled through the hundreds of names, a digital cascade of recipients. My name, Avery Cole, was not on the list. The system, however, registered the mirror copy as delivered, a technicality. I thrive on technicalities. I clicked the attachment. It was a high-resolution photograph, professionally staged in the company's third-floor test kitchen. Miriam stood at the head of a massive oak table, hands resting possessively on a turkey so perfect it looked like porcelain. She was flanked by my younger sister, Tessa, our VP of Communications, and Miriam's new husband, a man whose primary asset was his silence. The lighting was warm, catching the cranberry sauce in the polished silver. The caption beneath it, in the company's folksy branded script, read, "Family first, always." My corporate email remained silent. My professional identity had been scrubbed from the narrative, but my personal phone, sitting face down on the cool granite of my desk, buzzed once. A text message. From Mom. Don't come. It's for morale. There was no please, no Avery. We need to talk. It was a directive, short and sterile, a risk management decision. I, the director of risk, had been identified as a risk, a morale hazard. The coldness of it was familiar. It was the same tone she used to close a failing subdivision, a clean cut, no messy emotions. I stared at the words. It's for morale. Whose morale? The employees who would see the CEO's estranged elder daughter at the table? The investors who might sense a crack in the family-first facade, or hers? I shut down my terminal, the soft thud of the lock screen echoing in the quiet of my office. My office is a glass box on the 19th floor, overlooking the central plaza. Down below, I could see two men in cherry pickers struggling with a massive vinyl banner against the rising November wind. They were stretching it between the two main pillars of the corporate entrance. I watched them wrestle with the heavy canvas, the wind whipping it like a sail. Finally, it unfurled, the massive, bold letters snapping into place. Thankful to work at Hearthline. I took the elevator down, bypassing the executive garage, and walked out the front doors, my heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the granite. The air was frigid, smelling of diesel and imminent snow. The wind cut straight through my wool coat. I walked to my car, parked in the general employee lot, section D12. I sat in the driver's seat of my dark gray sedan, the engine off, the silence amplifying the whistle of the wind. On the curved glass of my windshield, the word thankful was reflected, backward and shimmering. Thankful, a word of compliance, a word of performance. I thought of the text message. I thought of the email. I thought of the staged photo. This wasn't a dinner. It was a quarterly earnings report enacted with poultry. I sat there for a long time, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 30. The cold seeped into the cabin. I didn't turn on the heat. I processed the event. The uninvite was a public statement of my irrelevance, a strategic move to excise the non-compliant part from the family brand. Miriam didn't just close a door, she publicly confirmed it was never there. I drove home, not to my sterile downtown apartment, but to my small, secure house 20 miles out of the city, the one I'd bought under a private LLC. My real office was there, a room with no windows, soundproofed walls, and a dedicated, air-gapped server. I sat at a terminal that had never once touched the Hearthline network. I didn't pull up the email. I didn't look at the text message again. I opened a different file, an encrypted container labeled HR Anon 047G. It was an anonymous whistleblower complaint that had come through my department's secure portal 2 weeks prior. A complaint about the Hearthline Employee Compassion Meal Fund. It was a small, well-meaning charity. Employees could opt in to donate a few dollars from every paycheck. The fund was meant to buy groceries for colleagues who'd had a house fire, or help with medical bills. It was, in theory, the one part of the Hearthline family that was real. The complaint was simple. The numbers didn't add up. The inflows were steady, but the outflows were erratic, and the documented beneficiaries were few. The fund's balance was significantly lower than it should be. I pulled up the fund's ledger, I pulled up the corporate accounts payable, and there, in the detailed transaction logs, I saw it, a series of transfers, not to employees, but from the Compassion Fund to a third-party vendor, a supplier I'd never heard of. Bright Harvest LLC, a food supplier, a very expensive food supplier. My fingers flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing state incorporation records. Bright Harvest LLC, registered 9 months ago. Managing partner? Our CFO. The same CFO who signed off on Miriam's expense reports. They were using the employees' own charity donations to pay for executive catering, to pay for... I looked at the dates. The largest transfers had happened in the last 2 weeks. They were paying for the Thanksgiving dinner. They were using the grocery money of their struggling workers to buy the porcelain-skinned turkeys for the corporate donors. A new, purer coldness settled over me. This wasn't family drama. This wasn't about being uninvited. This was a breach, a violation of ethics, a diversion of funds, my job. I opened my personal notebook, a heavy, leather-bound volume with a clasp, not a digital file, something real, something tangible. I wrote down the name, Bright Harvest LLC, with a black fountain pen. I wrote down the transaction numbers. Then, I wrote a new line, pressing the nib hard into the thick, cream-colored paper. Don't fight the invite list. Fight the ledger. The invitation was a symptom. The ledger was the disease. Miriam expected me to be hurt. She expected me to call Tessa, crying. She expected me to show up at Gullhaven Hall and make a scene, proving why I was a morale risk. She had planned for the emotional daughter. She had not planned for the director of risk. My anger was not hot. It was a precise, cold instrument. I looked at the calendar on my wall. Thanksgiving. Thursday. The dinner was scheduled from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. I knew the schedule by heart. Miriam's speech was the climax of the evening, the moment she stood in the spotlight, mic in hand, and spoke about gratitude and family and what we owe each other. I picked up my phone, I opened the clock app, I set a new alarm. Thursday, 6:55 p.m. The label, Initiate. It was 5 minutes before her annual performance, 5 minutes before the applause. I would let her walk onto that stage. I would let her take the mic. I returned to my notebook. I looked at the clean black script. It was a good plan, but it was missing a component. It wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the banner. It was about the public performance, the thankful sign, the family first photo. Miriam had made a public statement by excluding me. My response needed to be symmetrical. I added one last line to the page. Do it in public. I closed the book. The clasp clicked shut with the finality of a vault door. I went to the kitchen and made a pot of black coffee. I would be working late. I had to review every transaction. I had to map the entire flow of funds. I had to find the firewall vulnerabilities in the Gullhaven Hall's AV system. I had to draft the quiet, devastating legal notices. I was no longer the uninvited daughter. I was an auditor, and I was about to conduct the most thorough review of Miriam Cole's career. Hearthline Nutrition is the reigning sweetheart of the Grayford Weekly. We are the model family company, the local success story that proves you can build an empire on whole ingredients and good values. The Thanksgiving issue, which hit stands the Monday before my uninvite, was a masterpiece of this particular fiction. The cover photo is currently framed in the lobby, 6 feet tall. On it, my mother, Miriam Cole, is radiant in an autumn gold cashmere sweater. Her arms are wrapped around my sister, Tessa, our VP of Communications, our media face, is laughing, her head tilted back, her blonde hair catching the light. They look less like a CEO and her executive and more like a scene from a high-end catalog advertising generational wealth. I was at that photo shoot. I was standing just to the left of the frame. I remember the photographer, a nervous man from the Weekly, trying to arrange us. Maybe all three? He'd suggested, motioning for me to step in. Miriam hadn't even looked at him. No, she'd said, her voice pleasant, final. The lighting is better this way. She pulled Tessa closer, their cheeks touching. This is the shot. I'd just stepped back, my dark blazer blending into the shadows of the studio. I wasn't out of frame. I was never meant to be in it. The photographer snapped the picture, capturing the perfect embrace, and I stood there, an auditor of my own exclusion. That photo was the prologue to the email. Culture is a shared meal, Miriam announced at the last quarterly leadership summit, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous, glass-walled boardroom. She was unveiling the new Family First internal branding. When we break bread together, we build trust. We build a bond that no market fluctuation can break. The other VPs, most of whom she'd hired, nodded dutifully. They loved the metaphor. It was warm, it was domestic, it suggested belonging. I sat at the far end of the table, the seat reserved for risk and ethics. I picked up my pen, the same black fountain pen I used for my private ledger, and wrote in my notebook, shielded by the rim of my laptop. Culture is risk control. A shared meal is a point of vulnerability. It's a supply chain. It's a health code liability. It's an opportunity for exclusion. It's a performance, and every performance has a potential point of failure. Miriam saw a table full of loyal employees. I saw a room full of potential plaintiffs. This difference between us wasn't new. It was the foundation of our entire relationship. When I was 16, I was working the night shift at a 24-hour grocery store 3 towns over. I'd get home at 3 a.m., my clothes smelling of stale coffee, industrial floor wax, and the first hint of rot from the produce aisle. I was good at it. I was the one they trusted to count the tills, to spot the counterfeit 20s, to reconcile the delivery manifests against the invoices. I learned that numbers don't lie, even when people do. If the register was short $12.50, it was short $12.50s. The reason didn't matter. The fact did. While I was balancing ledgers under fluorescent lights, Tessa was at the West Vale Conservatory. She was learning ballet. Her life was measured in applause, in the precise placement of a foot, in the rustle of tulle. Miriam would drive an hour each way to watch her practice, sitting in the darkened auditorium. She never once visited me at the store. I wasn't jealous. Not really. We were just built for different things. Tessa's talent was visible, kinetic, beautiful. My talent was quiet, analytical, and boring. Our mother loves things that photograph well. Tessa photographs beautifully. I, on the other hand, prefer numbers that speak, and numbers, I found, always speak the truth, even if they whisper. It's Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving. I'm in my secure office, the one in my house. The Bright Harvest LLC file is open on my main screen. The flow of money from the Employee Compassion Fund is a clear, damning diagram. It's almost too easy. They were arrogant. My personal phone buzzes on the desk. A notification from Instagram. Tessa Cole has posted a new video. I tap it open. The title, in a bouncing, cheerful font, is The Real Thanksgiving with the Coles. The video is a whirlwind of manufactured warmth, shot on Tessa's phone. She's giving a behind-the-scenes tour of the Thanksgiving preparations. "Hey, Hearthline family," she chirps, her voice an octave higher than normal. "Mom and I are so excited to see you all tomorrow at Gullhaven Hall. We're just putting the finishing touches on a few surprises." She spins the camera around. They aren't at Gullhaven Hall. They are in the company's 7th-floor test kitchen. This is a violation. Simple and clean. The test kitchen is for product development, not for commercial catering. It isn't licensed to prepare food for 500 people. Tessa pans across bubbling pots of gravy, mountains of green beans, and a phalanx of turkeys being brined in massive plastic tubs. "Mom, say hi to the people!" Miriam looks up from trussing a bird, her sleeves rolled up. She's wearing a custom Hearthline apron. She smiles. A perfect, practiced smile. "We can't wait to share with all of you," she says, her voice rich with false intimacy. This is what family is all about. I watch the performance, my finger hovering over the screen. Tessa is laughing, filming the steam rising from a pot of mashed potatoes. She's promoting the event. She's creating a digital record of the liability. Okay, Tessa says. "I gotta go. But just look at all this amazing food we have for you." She pans the camera in a wide, fast arc, back toward the loading bay doors. And that's when I see it. My finger slams down on the pause button. The video freezes. In the background, partially obscured by a rolling stainless steel cart, is a stack of large brown cardboard boxes. I zoom in, the image pixelating slightly. The label on the side of the box is blurry, but legible. Bright Harvest LLC, Distributors of Fine Foods. Grayford, VA. My blood doesn't run cold. It sharpens. It focuses. It's the same feeling I got at the grocery store when the register tape spat out a number that didn't match the cash in the drawer. It's proof. They are using the diverted employee funds, siphoned through the CFO's shell company, to buy the food for the party, and they are preparing that food in an unlicensed kitchen, documenting the entire violation on social media for their 500,000 followers. I look at the frozen image of the box, then at the small, superimposed image of Miriam in the corner of the frame, smiling her perfect CEO smile. A memory surfaces, sharp and clear, years ago, when I was a junior analyst, just starting at Hearthline. I'd found a significant payroll discrepancy. A whole department's overtime had been miscalculated for 6 months. I'd documented it, prepared a report, and taken it straight to Miriam. She'd closed her office door. She wasn't smiling. "You never put this in writing, Avery," she'd said, her voice a low hiss. "You never, ever create a paper trail for a problem until I tell you one exists. Do you have any idea how much embarrassment this could cause?" "It's not about embarrassment," I'd said, confused. "It's about the money. We owe them." "We will handle it," she'd snapped. "Quietly. We don't air our laundry. You don't embarrass the family. Ever." I look back at my screen, at the Bright Harvest LLC logo, at the unlicensed kitchen, at the smiling faces of my mother and sister, performing their perfect family Thanksgiving for the world. Don't embarrass the family. I close the video. I pull up a fresh document. My fingers move quickly. I won't have to say a word. I won't have to cause a scene. I won't have to be the bitter, uninvited daughter. I'll just let the ledger talk. I'll let the health code talk. I'll let Tessa's own video talk. Miriam wants a performance. I'll give her one. I'll just make sure the right documents are projected on the screen behind her when she takes the stage. The day before Thanksgiving was a blur of silent escalation, while the rest of Hearthline was buzzing about early departures and holiday travel. I was in my secure room, waging a war on 3 fronts: financial, legal, and operational. The style was, by necessity, cold. This was not a family dispute. It was a tactical operation. First, the money. Always follow the money. On one monitor, I opened the transaction ledger for the Hearthline Employee Compassion Meal Fund. On the other, the accounts payable records for Bright Harvest LLC. I didn't need to hack the CFO. As director of risk, I had audit-level access to all vendor payment systems. I just had to know where to look. The Compassion Fund was supposed to be a simple pass-through account. Employees donated, and that exact money was paid out to other employees in need, evidenced by a documented claim. But I wasn't seeing documented claims. I was seeing invoices. A 9 a.m. data export and a simple VLOOKUP function in Excel told the whole story. The donations, thousands of dollars skimmed from paychecks, were being recategorized as operational expenses. These expenses were then used to pay invoices from Bright Harvest. The employees' grocery money, meant for their struggling colleagues, was flowing in a clean, digital stream from their paychecks into the CFO's shell company. This wasn't just a diversion. It was architecture. This led me to the second front, the contract. Payment logs. Reference contracts. I pulled the master vendor agreement for Bright Harvest. It was standard, boilerplate. But attached to it, scanned as a final page, was a one-page addendum. It was strange, hastily written, authorizing Bright Harvest to invoice the company for future-dated material advances against any available internal fund, bypassing the standard procurement controls. It was a license to dip into any petty cash account, including the Compassion Fund. The signature at the bottom made my breath catch, not in emotion, but in cold recognition. It was Miriam's. It wasn't her standard, digitized e-signature. It was a wet signature, scanned. She had signed it by hand. I knew that signature. It was written in the heavy royal blue fountain pen ink she reserved for actions of absolute authority. The same blue ink she used to sign termination letters and seven-figure acquisition deals. She had personally, tangibly, authorized the breach. I saved the file as Exhibit a Contract, PDF. Third, the operational front, the product itself. If Bright Harvest was the supplier, what was it supplying? The invoices were vague. Premium holiday goods. Catering components. I moved to the warehouse management system. I have access because supply chain disruption is a primary risk. I cross-referenced the invoice numbers with warehouse receiving logs. I found them. 2 large shipments from Bright Harvest, delivered in the dead of night. The logs were time-stamped 2:14 a.m. and 2:18 a.m. The notes section, usually filled with inspection data, was blank, save for a manual override entry by the night manager. Relabel per M, C directive, batch B harvest, bypass QOA, bypass quality assurance, MC, Miriam Cole. These weren't just turkeys bought with stolen money. They were uninspected turkeys, arriving from a ghost vendor, relabeled in the dark, and rushed into the food supply for the single largest corporate event of the year. The trap was no longer just financial. It was a biological time bomb. I saved the log screenshot, Exhibit B Warehouse, JPG. Now, I had the internal evidence. It was time to build the external pressure. My first call was not a call. It was a public records request. I filed a standard FOIA request with the Gray County Health Department at 10:15 a.m., using my personal email, identifying myself as a local resident. The query was simple. Please provide a copy of any valid temporary food service permit or catering license for an event at Gullhaven Hall, 900 Corporate Drive, for Thursday, November 23rd. The digital response came back in 45 minutes. No such permit exists on file. They were preparing uninspected food in an unlicensed kitchen, Tessa's video, Exhibit C video, MP4, to be served at an unpermitted event. The chain of liability was complete, and it led directly back to the CEO's office. I saved the email from the county, Exhibit D license, PDF. With the evidence collected, I began setting the board. I was not going to be the one to walk into that ballroom and scream. I was going to send professionals. I was going to send men with clipboards. I established the chain of authorization. At 11:30 a.m., I made a call to Mr. Kincaid, a labor lawyer I keep on a quiet retainer for ethics consultations. Mr. Kincaid, I said. I have an anonymous whistleblower report, fully documented, showing systemic diversion of an employee benefit fund. The fund in question is the Hearthline Compassion Fund. Kincaid, who lives to litigate wage theft, was silent for a long moment. Ms. Cole, he said, his voice now sharp. That is a class action suit waiting to be born. Where is the documentation? It will be on your server in 5 minutes, I replied. I need you available tomorrow evening, 7 p.m., Gullhaven Hall. Consider it a formal invitation. At 1 p.m., I engaged Ms. Ramirez, the most ruthless forensic auditor in the state. I did it through a secure portal, acting as an anonymous concerned party on behalf of the board of directors. The retainer was substantial, paid from an account she couldn't trace back to me. Her brief: appear at Gullhaven Hall at 7 o'clock p.m. to receive a file regarding a time-sensitive financial irregularity and secure the company's books. At 2:30 p.m., I filed a formal, anonymous tip with the Gray County Health Department's Enforcement Division. I attached my FOIA response, Exhibit D, and the public link to Tessa's Instagram video, Exhibit C. The tip read, "Clear and present public health risk, unlicensed mass food preparation for a public donor event." By statute, they were now required to investigate. The Thanksgiving holiday meant they would be short-staffed, but a complaint this specific, with video proof, would force them to dispatch the on-call inspector. The lawyer, the auditor, and the health inspector. Those were my invitations to the party. But there was one final piece, the kill shot. This piece was not for Miriam. It was for her infrastructure. I returned to my research on Bright Harvest LLC. It was a shell. And shell companies are hungry. They don't have capital. They have debt. I ran a UCC lien search. As I expected, Bright Harvest was floating on a high-interest, short-term loan from a private, non-traditional lender. This is where my own shell company came in. 18 months ago, I established Northbridge Compliance. It's an independent consulting firm, registered out of state, held by a blind trust. Its legal owner is a Delaware address. Its beneficial owner is me. It has a robust bank account, funded by my own salary and bonuses, which Miriam always mistook for extravagant spending. At 3 p.m., Northbridge Compliance contacted the private lender who held Bright Harvest's debt. I didn't ask to buy all of it. I asked to buy a 20% stake. To the lender, this was found money, a chance to offload 20% of their risk at a 10% premium. The sale was electronic and finalized by 4:30 p.m. I was now one of Bright Harvest's creditors. I spent the next hour reading the fine print of the loan agreement, and there it was. Section 8B, Subsection 3, Covenants. The loan was contingent on the borrower remaining in full compliance with all state and federal food safety, handling, and transportation laws. A violation of this covenant triggered an immediate event of default, making the entire loan due instantly. The 2:14 a.m. warehouse log, the unlicensed kitchen. They had been in default for 36 hours. My phone chimed. The 6:55 p.m. alarm I'd set, initiate, it was still 24 hours away. I silenced it. The plan was set. All the pieces were in motion. All that remained was to alert the board. I couldn't risk Miriam finding out. I needed the final domino to fall during the performance, not before. I compiled the executive summary, the fund diversion, the uninspected food, the unlicensed event, the labor law violations, the invalidated insurance, and the immediate, callable debt default triggered by Northbridge. I put it all on a single, encrypted USB drive. I placed the drive in a heavy 9x12 envelope. I typed a label, no name, no department. To the chairman of the board, Marcus Thorne. I sent it via a bonded, same-day courier to his private home, marked personal and confidential. A sticky note on the front, also typed, contained the only instructions. Mr. Thorne, do not open until 7:01 p.m., Thursday, November 23rd. Your presence at the Gullhaven Hall dinner is critical. This is a Level 1 risk event. Marcus Thorne is a man who prizes order above all else. He detests liability. He loathes public scenes. He would be there. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that Miriam's speech about family was scheduled to begin at 7:00 p.m. sharp. She would have exactly 60 seconds of applause before her world came to an end. Thanksgiving Thursday. 6:30 p.m. Gullhaven Hall was a blazing jewel set against the cold, purple-black sky. From my position in the darkest corner of the employee parking lot, it looked like a postcard of American abundance. Warm light spilled from the tall, arched windows, illuminating the perfect lawn, now stiff with frost. I could see the guests arriving, a stream of dark coats and bright scarves, laughing as they hurried from their cars. Inside, I knew, was a different world. A world built by Miriam. I'd seen the event specs. The tablecloths were a rustic red and white check. The centerpieces were miniature cornucopias, and on every plate, next to the embossed linen napkin, was a small, laser-etched wooden coaster, the party favor, bearing the Hearthline logo and the slogan, "We are family." The performance was in full swing. My phone vibrated with another notification from Tessa's live stream. I opened it. The signal was strong. Her voice was giddy, slightly breathless. She was in the service corridor, just behind the main stage. "Oh my God, you guys, it smells amazing back here," she whispered, her eyes wide for the camera. "Mom is about to do her famous carving lesson for the donor table before the big speech. Look." She flipped the camera. Through a set of swinging doors, I could see the chaos of the temporary kitchen. Staff in white jackets rushed back and forth, and there, under a set of blazing heat lamps, was Miriam. She was holding a massive, glistening turkey, a long carving knife in her hand. She was demonstrating the first cut to a small, rapt audience of our biggest donors. "Isn't she incredible?" Tessa gushed, flipping the camera back to her own face. "She's literally doing everything tonight." I watched Miriam smile, her movements practiced and graceful. The image on my screen was a perfect tableau of corporate domesticity. It was also a documented felony, the serving of uninspected, unpermitted food, purchased with stolen funds. Tessa, in her endless quest for content, was helpfully time-stamping the evidence. I looked away from the screen, out my windshield. The parking lot was full now. The air was perfectly still. And then, I heard it. A thin, reedy sound, carried on the wind. A children's choir. They must have been in a holding room near the side entrance. They were practicing their warm-ups. And then, a piano struck a chord, and they began to sing. The song was Home. Their high, innocent voices were a clean, crystalline counterpoint to the deep, complex fraud I was monitoring. The sound was pure, and it made the entire event feel even more grotesque. It was the audio overlay to the grand lie. My watch chimed. 6:40 p.m. I checked my side mirror, as if summoned by the clock. A dark blue, late-model sedan pulled into the service road at the far end of the lot. It was an unremarkable car, a Ford Taurus, the official vehicle of mid-level bureaucrats everywhere. It stopped, well away from the hall, and its headlights cut out. The health inspector was on time. He wouldn't move yet. He was waiting. A complaint about preparation was one thing. A complaint about serving was another. He was waiting for the food to hit the tables. He was waiting for the event to be irrevocably in progress. My phone buzzed again. 6:45 p.m. It was time to arm my soldiers. I was parked in the deep shadows of the parking garage's lowest level, near the stairwell. I saw a figure descend the stairs. Ms. Ramirez, the forensic auditor. She was in a dark gray suit, carrying a briefcase. She saw my car and walked to the passenger side, but did not try to open the door. I lowered the window an inch. The cold air sliced in. "Ms. Ramirez," I said. "Good evening," she replied, her voice all business. "The retainer has been accepted. The file?" I passed a small velvet pouch through the gap. "This is a high-fidelity audio recorder. It's already active. For your personal records. The board will receive its own copy." She nodded, slipping it into her pocket. And the primary file? I passed her a slim black USB. You will receive an authorization key via text at 7:02 p.m. The file is labeled Audit Priority Omega. It contains the complete ledger of the Compassion Fund and the Bright Harvest invoices. Your authorization is from the board, effective immediately. Understood. She turned and walked back to the stairwell, vanishing as silently as she had arrived. 2 minutes later, a second figure appeared, Mr. Kincaid, the labor lawyer. He was older, paunchier, and radiated an aggressive energy that even his expensive overcoat couldn't hide. He approached the driver's side. "This is highly irregular, Ms. Cole," he grumbled, his voice a low rumble. "It's highly documented, Mr. Kincaid," I replied. Lowering my window again, I handed him a stiff, legal-sized folder. The label, embossed in gold, read, Donor Diversion, an analysis of the Hearthline, Employee Compassion Fund. "This," I said, "is the full case, the diverted funds, the employee payroll deductions, the internal contract signed by the CEO, and the witness list of every employee who donated. They are expecting a turkey dinner. You are bringing them a class action lawsuit." Kincaid's eyes lit up as he thumbed the thickness of the folder. "And I present this? When?" "My instructions are precise. Wait for the signal. It will be public." "I do love a public signal." He smiled, tucked the folder under his arm like a treasured book, and walked away. My watch read 6:50 p.m. I picked up my burner phone. I sent a pre-drafted, encrypted text. The recipient was Marcus Thorne, the chairman of the board. He was sitting at table 1, right next to the stage. My text read, "The stage is live. The mic will be hot. 7:01 p.m. A second later, I received a one-word reply. "Standing by." I turned off the burner phone and placed it in the glove compartment. I would not need it again. It was time. From the back of the hall, through the tinted glass of the doors, I watched the stage. 6:53 p.m. A young technician in a black polo shirt stepped up to the podium. He tapped the microphone. "Test, 1, 2, test." On the massive LED screens flanking the stage, the Hearthline. Family First logo flickered. It was replaced by a test pattern, then by the logo again. The tech nodded, gave a thumbs up to someone in the back, and walked off stage. He was testing the signal. He had no idea that I, via the vendor-level credentials for Northbridge, was already deep inside the AV control server. He was checking the hardware, but I owned the software. He had just confirmed my weapon was loaded. I got out of my car. The cold was a shock, but it was clarifying. I pulled my black coat tighter. I did not walk toward the grand, warmly lit front entrance. I walked around the side, toward the clatter and steam and shouting of the service entrance. A tired-looking security guard stood by the door, checking a list. He was overwhelmed. I walked up to him with purpose. "Excuse me," I said, my voice polite, detached. "Guests are at the front," he said, not looking up. I held up the badge I had printed that morning. It was a perfect replica of our vendor passes. The name read, Avery, the company, Northbridge Compliance. "Vendor," I said, "AV Consult." He grunted, scanned my name on his list. It was there. I had added it myself at 3 a.m. "Fine, go," he said, motioning me inside. I stepped through the door. The heat and noise were a physical blow. The air was thick with thyme, sage, and the smell of roasting poultry. It was the epicenter of the crime. Stainless steel tables were piled high with food. Staff rushed everywhere. No one looked at me. I was just another contractor in a black suit. I was invisible. I navigated the maze of hot trays and rolling carts, moving toward the service corridor that led to the main hall. I was focused, my mind a cold, clear path to the AV booth at the back of the ballroom. "Watch it!" someone shouted. A door swung open, and Tessa burst out, nearly colliding with me. She was holding her phone in one hand and a clipboard in the other, her face flushed and stressed. She looked up at me, annoyed. "Oh, God, sorry," she huffed. I stood still. We were 2 feet apart. Her eyes, so much like my mother's, scanned my face. I saw her register my black suit, my severe expression, and the vendor badge clipped to my lapel. I saw the exact moment her brain processed the information. She didn't see Avery. She didn't see her sister. She saw a stranger. She saw an obstacle. "Ma'am," she said, her voice sharp with authority. "Excuse me. Vendor access is through the other hall. You're in the way of the staff." I didn't move. I held her gaze. I watched her dismiss me. I watched her erase me from my own family's company. I smiled. It was a small, thin, polite smile. The smile of a vendor who understands. "My apologies," I said. My voice was flat, professional. Tessa was already looking past me, shouting at a waiter. "Table 4 needs more wine before the speech. Go!" She rushed off toward the stage, disappearing into the crowd, leaving me alone in the corridor. I straightened my badge. I turned and walked, not toward the other hall, but directly into the ballroom. I moved along the back wall, the choir's songs swelling, the sound of 500 people talking and laughing. I slipped into the shadows of the AV booth. The tech was gone, probably on a break. I sat down at his control board. The master feed was open. My USB port was waiting. I looked at my watch. 6:54 p.m. I was in position. The stage was set. My watch read 6:55 p.m. In the ballroom, the lights dimmed. A single, sharp-edged spotlight cut through the haze of warmth and conversation, finding my mother on the low stage. The room fell into a respectful, expectant hush. Miriam Cole stood, radiant, at a carving station next to the podium. In her hand, she held a long, gleaming carving knife. The turkey before her was a bronze shield, perfect and unreal. She tapped her lapel microphone. The sound was sharp, intimate, amplified through the dozens of speakers arrayed around the hall. I heard it in the AV booth, a precise metallic click. It was live. Everything was live. "Thank you," she began. Her voice a warm, rich syrup poured over the silent crowd. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for being our family." She smiled, and the large screens on either side of her showed her in perfect, adoring close-up. She raised the knife. "On Thanksgiving, we talk about gratitude," she said, pressing the blade's tip into the turkey's crisp skin. "We talk about the bounty we are so privileged to share." The knife slid, a clean, surgical incision. The sound of it, the faint shing of steel against skin, was also captured by the microphone. It was obscene. I was in the back, in the dark, in the AV booth. The young tech had returned, a half-eaten cookie in his hand. He froze when he saw me. "Hey, ma'am, you can't be in here. This is restricted." I didn't look at him. I was watching my mother on the monitors. I slid a heavy black document box onto his console, next to the glowing control board. "You're going to do exactly as I say," I said, my voice low and flat. Not a request. "At 7:01 p.m., you will switch the main video feed for both LED screens from camera 1 to input 4. Do you understand?" "What? No, I can't," he stammered. "I don't have authorization for that. That's the presentation feed. It's supposed to be blank." "This is a directive from the board of directors," I said. I tapped the file box. "The authorization is in here. The instructions are on a flash drive, plugged into input 4. You will press one button. You will press it at 7:01 p.m., or you will be named as an accessory to a federal crime. Look at my badge." He squinted at my lapel. "Northbridge Compliance. I don't—" "We are the independent auditors for the board. This is a live risk event. Your job is to press the button." His eyes went wide. He looked from my face, cold, unmoving, to the screens, where my mother was now setting aside the first perfect slice of turkey. He swallowed the bite of cookie, his youthful confidence gone. His hand hovered over the console. "Family," Miriam continued, her voice swelling with emotion. "Family can be Complicated. She let out a small, knowing laugh, the kind that invites an audience in on a shared secret. But we stick together. We protect each other. We forgive each other's quirks. She was looking in the general direction of Table 1, where Marcus Thorne, the chairman, was sitting. But her story wasn't for him. It was for the crowd. I remember one Thanksgiving. Oh, it must have been 20 years ago. My eldest, Avery, she was a girl, just 9 years old. My breath did not catch. My heart did not beat faster. I watched the clock. 6:57 p.m. We had a table just like this, Miriam said, gesturing to the feast. And Avery just refused to eat. She sat there with her arms crossed, looking at this beautiful, wonderful meal, and she was angry. Polite, indulgent laughter rippled through the room. I could see Tessa, near the stage, filming with her phone, a look of beatific adoration on her face. She was such a picky eater, my mother exclaimed, as if it were the most charming flaw. She had her little notebook out, and she said, "The numbers don't add up. The turkey-to-stuffing ratio is inefficient, and I've calculated a 30% waste factor in the cranberry sauce." The room roared with laughter this time. It was a good line, a perfect anecdote. It painted me, her absent daughter, as a cold, joyless creature, a little adding machine. We all just laughed. What could you do? Miriam sighed, performing a mother's gentle exasperation. Some children, they just aren't built for joy. They're built for, well, I am just so glad, so thankful, to be here tonight with all of you, my real family. The applause was thunderous. She had them. She had painted me as the other, the why I wasn't there. I was the morale risk, the picky eater. I looked at the clock. 6:58 p.m. The tech, his face pale, looked at me. She's talking about... Watch the clock, I said. At that exact moment, the machinery began to move. It started at the front, far from the stage. At the main reception desk in the lobby, a young woman in a Hearthline blazer, hired for the night, was checking in a late-coming donor. The doors to the outside opened, letting in a gust of frigid air. 2 men and 1 woman entered. They were not in formal wear. They wore dark blue, county-issued windbreakers. The man in the lead, clipboard in hand, approached the desk. "Good evening," he said, his voice all business. "Gray County Health Department. We're here to check the temporary food service permit for this event." The blazer-clad woman stared at him. The permit? This is a private event, a corporate dinner." The inspector looked past her, at the massive banner hanging in the foyer. "Hearthline Nutrition welcomes our community donors. This is a catered, public donor event," he said, his voice hardening. "I need to see the permit, and I need to inspect the kitchen facilities, immediately." The woman fumbled for her walkie-talkie. Brenda? Can you come to the front? There are some people here." 6:59 p. In the ballroom, the applause was dying down. The chaos at the door was a distant, muffled disturbance, not yet perceived. I stood up from the AV console. At my signal, I told the tech. I walked out of the booth, into the main room. I moved to the very back wall, directly in the line of sight of the main wide-angle camera. I stood, my arms folded, a shadow against the back wallpaper. I was visible. I was present. I was on the record. 7 p.m. Miriam, finished with her anecdote, her face flushed with victory, motioned for a waiter. He handed her a tall, bubbling flute of champagne. She raised it high. The spotlight hit the crystal, and it scattered light across her face like diamonds. "So," she beamed, her voice ringing with absolute, unassailable authority, "to gratitude, to hard work, to the company that gives us purpose, and to the most important thing, to family." From all over the room, 500 glasses were raised. "To family," the crowd echoed. My eyes were on the AV booth. I saw the pale face of the tech, staring at his console clock. The numbers flipped. 7:58. 7:59. Miriam brought the glass to her lips. 7:01 hunk. I nodded. Once. The tech, his hand trembling, slammed his finger down on the button for input 4. For a quarter of a second, the two giant LED screens flanking my mother went dead black. The silence was total. Every eye in the room snapped to the screens. They were expecting the We Are Family logo to return. Instead, the screens flashed bright white. A new image resolved, stark and cold. It was not a video. It was not a graphic. It was a document, a bank transfer summary. It was rendered in high definition black and white, impossible to misread. At the top, the Hearthline logo, taken from the company's own letterhead. Line 1. Account name. Hearthline, Employee Compassion Meal Fund. Below it, a list of transactions, dates, and times, and a repeating vendor name. Transfer to Bright Harvest, LLC. Transfer to Bright Harvest, LLC. Transfer to Bright Harvest, LLC. And at the bottom, a grand total, digitally circled in a brutal, precise red. 147,850,000. For 3 seconds, no one breathed. The room was frozen. They were processing. They were squinting, confused. What was this? A mistake? A terrible technical glitch? Miriam was the most confused of all. She was still smiling, her glass held aloft. The image of the bank statement projected on the screen directly behind her head like a damning halo. She hadn't read it yet. She turned, annoyed, to Marcus Thorne at table 1. She leaned in, her lapel mic still live. Her whisper, meant for him alone, boomed across the entire ballroom, as loud as her speech. Marcus, what is this? This isn't part of the presentation. Turn it off. Her amplified voice, sharp with irritation, broke the spell. The whispers began. A man at table 5, a mid-level manager. Is that the employee fund? A woman near the front, a donor. Bright Harvest. Isn't that? Who is that? I donate to that fund, someone else said, his voice rising. That's my money. The sound started low, a shuffling of chairs, the clinking of a dropped fork. It wasn't a shout. It was a hiss. It was the collective sound of 500 people realizing the truth, all at once. It was the sound of wind, cold and sharp, rustling across every single red and white checked tablecloth in the room. The hissing sound in the ballroom was sharp, a sudden intake of 500 breaths. The screens still glowed, the damning bank statement frozen in the air. Miriam, her face pale, was staring at Marcus Thorne, her champagne glass still held aloft. Boom, boom, boom. A heavy official knock rattled the grand oak doors of the ballroom. It was not a polite knock, it was a demand. The doors swung open, banging against the walls. The cold night air rushed in, a physical shock against the manufactured warmth. The man in the county-issued windbreaker stood silhouetted in the doorway. Behind him were 2 others, all holding metal clipboards. He strode into the room, his boots loud on the polished floor. The music, a soft classical piece, died abruptly. He walked past the stunned guests, his eyes on the stage, on the carving station, on the platters of food now being served. This event is not authorized, he announced, his voice carrying with the force of absolute, non-negotiable authority. I am from the Gray County Health Department. I need to see your temporary food service permit for this gathering. Now. A banquet manager, his face as white as his shirt, hurried forward. Sir, please, this is a misunderstanding. Miriam found her voice. She lowered her glass, her smile a rigid mask. Officer, she called from the stage, her voice tight. There must be some mistake. This is an internal corporate event. The inspector didn't look at her. He looked up. He pointed one, steady finger at the massive vinyl banner hanging over the stage, the one that mirrored the sign in the lobby. The sign, he said, reads, Community Donor Dinner. That makes this a public event. You are serving food to the public. Where's your permit? Miriam's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The manager was stammering. I will check with I don't have it. That's because one doesn't exist. My voice? It cut through the silence. I was walking. I had left my post at the back wall and was walking steadily, deliberately, down the center aisle. The crowd parted for me. I could feel hundreds of eyes on my back, on my face, on my vendor badge. They were connecting the anecdote of the picky, joyless child to the woman in the black suit walking toward the stage. I stopped in front of the inspector. I held out a single, folded piece of paper, my FOIA response. I filed a public records request with your office this morning, I said, my voice clear and calm. There is no permit on file. There never was. The inspector took the paper. He glanced at it. He nodded. This is correct. What? What is this? Miriam hissed. She was looking at me, her eyes narrowing, the confusion giving way to a cold, familiar rage. It's a compliance audit, Mother. Avery! Her voice was a whip crack. Before she could say more, a second figure stepped forward, emerging from the crowd near table 1. Ms. Ramirez, the forensic auditor. She held up her own credentials to Marcus Thorne, the chairman, who was now standing. Mr. Thorne, Ramirez said, her voice crisp. I am Ms. Ramirez, representing the board's independent auditors, per your authorization. She held up a sealed document from him. I am here to secure the ledgers for the Employee Compassion Fund, pending an immediate investigation into the irregularities projected on screen. Projected. The tech in the booth had kept the screens live. The bank statement was still there for everyone to see. I glanced at Tessa. She was standing frozen by the stage, her phone still in her hand, aimed at her mother. The live stream was still active. I could see the red live icon on her screen. Her face was a mask of utter childlike confusion. Mom? She whispered. Her mic-enabled phone picked up the sound, broadcasting it to her thousands of followers. Mom, what's happening? Who are these people? As if summoned by the word kitchen, the service doors swung open again. 2 waiters, oblivious to the drama, emerged carrying massive silver platters piled high with sliced turkey. The health inspector saw them. He reacted instantly. Stop. Do not serve that. He walked over to the cart, pulled a digital thermometer from his pocket, and plunged it into the meat. He looked at the reading. He looked at the waiter. Where was this food prepared? He demanded. The company test kitchen, sir, on the 7th floor. The waiter stammered. This facility is not a licensed commercial kitchen, the inspector snapped. This entire batch is uninspected and in violation of Public Health Code 14.5. It cannot be served. It must be recalled. All of it. Now. Recall? A guest at a front table said, looking down at his full plate. Seize all of it, the inspector ordered his team, who began moving toward the kitchen doors. This was the point of no return. This was the public, irreversible, humiliating collapse. All the blood had drained from Miriam's face. Her eyes, 2 chips of ice, finally locked on me. She understood. The screens, the inspector, the auditor, me. She took a step toward me, her hand gripping the carving knife on the table. Avery, she said. It was not a request. It was a command. The voice of a CEO. The voice of a mother who had never been disobeyed in public. Avery, turn this off. I stood my ground, 10 feet from the stage. I had been in the AV booth. I had seen the spare wireless lapel microphone sitting on the charging dock, the one meant for the keynote speaker. It was now clipped neatly to the inside of my blazer. The tech in the booth, watching me, saw my hand move. He hit the switch, transferring the live audio feed from Miriam's mic to mine. I touched the small square pack on my shirt. The sound of my fingers tapping the live mic boomed through the hall, a sound of defiance. Tap, tap. I looked at my mother. I looked at the 500 guests. I looked at the video camera Tessa was still holding. And I said one word. My voice, amplified, filled every corner of the room. cold and final. No, my single word. No, hung in the air, amplified and absolute. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound than before. My mother's face, which had been a mask of rage, now held a flicker of something new, uncertainty. She had given a command, and for the first time in her public life, it had been refused. All eyes snapped from her to me. I was no longer the invisible vendor. I was the opposition. The spell was broken by Marcus Thorne, the chairman of the board, a man whose face looked carved from old, expensive wood, stood up from table 1. He smoothed the front of his vest, his expression one of deep, cold displeasure. He had received my envelope. He had read the file. He was now operating on my timeline. He did not look at me. He looked directly at my mother, who was still on the stage, a pariah in her own spotlight. "Miriam," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable weight of command. The AV tech, bless his terrified heart, caught the cue and switched the master mic feed from me to Marcus. "Miriam," Marcus repeated, his voice now booming through the room. "The board requires an explanation. Please address the item on the screens. Explain the advances totaling $147,000 from the Employee Compassion Fund to the entity Bright Harvest LLC." My mother gripped the podium, her knuckles white. She was trying to shift gears, from monarch to executive. "Marcus," she said, her voice strained. "This is a transparent attempt by a disgruntled employee," she threw a venomous glance at me, "to disrupt a wonderful evening. It's a simple accounting." "It is not," I said, my own mic feed suddenly live again as I hit the switch on my belt pack. "The tech in the booth, please switch to input 5, exhibit video." The tech complied. The bank statements vanished, replaced by a new image. Tessa's Instagram livestream. "What is this?" Tessa shrieked, her voice her own, not amplified. The video began to play. The room was forced to watch Tessa's giddy, behind-the-scenes tour. They saw the unlicensed test kitchen, the steam, the chaos, and Miriam, smiling, holding a turkey. "Mom, say hi to the people," the video Tessa chirped. Video Miriam smiled. "This is what family is all about." Then, the pan, the zoom in, the clear, unmistakable shot of the stacked boxes. Bright Harvest LLC. A gasp went up from the crowd. The health inspector, who had been quietly directing his team to seal the kitchen doors, stopped. He looked at the screen. "That's my video," Tessa whispered, horrified. "Indeed it is," the inspector called out, his voice cutting through the room. "And you have just provided video documentation of uninspected goods from an unverified vendor being prepared in an unlicensed facility. This is now a criminal investigation." "And a contractual one," I said. The tech, now following my lead, switched to the next file. Exhibit a contract. The addendum flashed onto the screens, the vague, sweeping language authorizing advances from any available internal fund, and there, at the bottom, blown up to fill the 12-foot screen, was her signature, not the corporate e-cig, the heavy, arrogant, royal blue fountain pen. "That signature," I said, my voice clinical, "authorized the transfer of employee-donated grocery money. It funded the very meal you are now, or were, being served." "This is an outrage," Miriam shouted, finding her footing in indignation. "It's a distortion. These are internal matters. This is a family dispute." "It is not," a new voice boomed. Mr. Kincaid, the labor lawyer, stepped forward, his folder held aloft. He was a born performer, and this was his stage. He walked to the center aisle, directly addressing the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "my name is David Kincaid. I represent the interests of the employees who donated to the Compassion Fund. This is not a family dispute. It is wage theft, plain and simple." He turned his attention to Marcus Thorne and the other 3 board members at Table 1. "Mr. Thorne, pursuant to the Hearthline Nutrition Corporate Bylaws, which I have right here," he tapped his folder, Article 9, Section 4. The willful diversion of employee-designated funds for non-designated corporate purposes constitutes a Class C ethics violation. Do you dispute this? Marcus Thorne looked at Miriam. His face was granite. The bylaw is clear. Good, Kincaid beamed. Because Section 4B of that same bylaw requires that upon presentation of evidence of such a violation, the board must immediately hold a vote for the temporary removal of the offending officer, pending a full independent audit. He was not asking. He was informing. He was executing the trap I had set. This is ridiculous, Miriam protested, her voice losing its timbre. This is procedure, Kincaid countered. All at once, Miriam seemed to see the room for what it was. It was no longer her adoring audience. It was not a collection of donors and employees. It was a jury, the faces she had invited, the people she had curated for her performance, were now watching, silent, waiting for the verdict. Her family had become a tribunal. Marcus? She said, her voice suddenly small, pleading. Marcus Thorne looked at his fellow board members. Their faces were impassive. They were businessmen, and the one thing they hated more than anything was public liability, and I had just served it to them on a silver platter. A vote is required, Marcus said, his voice flat. All members of the board in favor of the temporary removal of CEO Miriam Cole, pending investigation. Mr. Chairman. My voice cut him off. He stopped, annoyed at the second interruption. Before you hold that vote, I said, my voice amplified, ringing with absolute calm. There is one more thing, a final piece of liability the board must consider before it decides its next move. Every eye in the room, including Miriam's and Marcus's, turned back to me. I was still wearing the vendor badge. My colleagues from the health department and Mr. Kincaid's firm have addressed the internal corporate and criminal violations, I said, walking to the side of the ballroom. I picked up a sleek black briefcase I had stashed there earlier. I walked back to the center of the room, to the open space between the stage and the head tables. I am here to address the external financial liability. I clicked the briefcase open. My name is Avery Cole. As you know, I am the Director of Risk, but I am also here tonight as the authorized representative of Northbridge Compliance. A few of the finance people in the room, including the CFO, who looked like he had swallowed ice, recognized the name. Northbridge was a notoriously aggressive, private auditing and compliance firm. Northbridge Compliance, I continued, as of 4:30 p.m. yesterday, acquired a senior creditor position in the debt structure of Bright Harvest, LLC. This was it, the shot she never saw coming. Miriam's face, which had been angry, then fearful, now crumpled into genuine, profound shock. She finally understood. This wasn't just an attack, it was an encirclement. I am holding, I said, pulling a sheaf of papers from the briefcase. The master loan agreement for Bright Harvest. I'm sure the CFO will recognize it. It contains, as most such high-risk loans do, a series of covenants. I read from the paper, my voice projecting clearly. Section 8B, subsection 3. The loan is contingent on the borrower, Bright Harvest LLC, and its primary partners remaining in full compliance with all state and federal food safety, handling, and transportation laws. I lowered the paper and looked up. I gestured with an open hand to the health inspector, who was watching me with a look of dawning respect. As the officer from the Gray County Health Department has just publicly confirmed, and as Exhibit C video, Tessa's own footage, irrefutably proves, Hearthline Nutrition and its vendor Bright Harvest LLC are in direct, flagrant, and criminal violation of these food safety laws. I let that hang in the air for a beat. Therefore, I said, my voice dropping, per the terms of the default clause, Northbridge Compliance hereby exercises its right to call the entire outstanding loan of Bright Harvest LLC due and payable, effective immediately. I walked from the center of the room, past the frozen guests, directly to the head table. I did not go to my mother. I went to our chief financial officer, the man who had set up the shell company. He was staring at his plate, his face a waxy, gray color. I placed the formal notice of default on the table in front of him. The thud of the paper on the linen tablecloth was barely audible, but he flinched as if it were a gunshot. "That," I said, my voice still amplified by the lapel microphone, "is the invoice." I turned to Marcus Thorne. "As of this moment, Bright Harvest LLC is in default and is insolvent. Its only collateral, its only asset of value, is its exclusive long-term supply contract with Hearthline Nutrition." I let that sink in. The CFO was now a liability. His company was a liability, and that liability was a chain, tied directly to the corporation itself. "I am sure you recall, Mr. Thorne," I continued, "the covenants on our own corporate bonds, the ones we issued last quarter, they contain a standard change in control and cross-default clause, a catastrophic failure and immediate default by a primary, sole source supplier, which Bright Harvest now is, thanks to the contract my mother signed, triggers an immediate cross-default on Hearthline's own debt." The color drained from Marcus Thorne's face. This was no longer about stolen employee funds or bad press. This was about the entire financial structure of the company collapsing. This was about his money, his reputation. He turned to my mother. His voice was no longer displeased. It was a razor. "Miriam, you have one chance to prevent this, to prevent a cross-default that will bankrupt this company by Monday. You will resign, effective immediately." He was already pulling a file from his own briefcase. "And you will sign this. It grants the board emergency authority to void any and all contracts with Bright Harvest LLC. We must sever the link. You will sign it. Tonight." My mother's eyes were wide, darting from Marcus to the CFO, to the guests, and finally, to me. She saw no allies. The jury had become the executioner. She took a shaky breath, her mask of authority completely gone. She looked at me, her daughter, the picky eater, the morale risk. "Avery," she whispered, a desperate, last-ditch appeal. "Avery, this is family." I looked her directly in the eye. I felt the weight of the entire room, the silence of 500 people listening. I let my voice drop, not in volume, but in temperature. Family doesn't send invoices paid for by employee donations. A single, sharp gasp came from somewhere in the room. Marcus Thorne didn't wait. "We are in session," he barked at the other board members. "A vote for the temporary, immediate removal of Miriam Cole as CEO and the transfer of crisis authority to the board." "Aye," one member said. "Aye," said another. "Aye, aye, aye." One member, a longtime loyalist, sat silent, his hands clasped. "Aye," Marcus said. "The motion passes, 6-1, he declared. He pushed the paper toward my mother, along with his own pen. "Sign." Numbly, she took the pen. Her hand was shaking. She scribbled her name. The bold, blue ink signature, now just a spidery, broken line. Marcus took the paper back. He signed it himself. Then he looked not at another board member, but at me. He held the paper out. "Ms. Cole," he said, "as the Director of Ethics and Risk, and as the only person in this room who seems to know what's going on, you are hereby granted temporary authorization to manage this crisis, contain it." I stepped forward. I took the pen from his hand. I signed my name, Avery Cole, on the line directly below my mother's. I was now in charge. The transfer of power was complete. It was a legal binding, public execution. And from the back of the hall, from the kitchens now sealed by the health department, a sound. A high, cheerful electronic ding. An oven timer. A batch of something, somewhere, was ready, but the kitchen was empty. No one was coming. No one was bringing out any more food. The feast was over. The sound of the oven timer, that cheerful domestic ding, echoed and died in the catastrophic silence. The vote was done. The authority was transferred. I had signed the paper. My mother stood on the stage, a queen deposed, the carving knife still on the table beside her. And then, a new sound, a wet, choking sob. All eyes, including mine, swiveled to the side of the stage, to Tessa. Her face, which had been a mask of frozen, uncomprehending shock, crumpled. It was not a performance. It was a collapse. Her mascara, the expensive waterproof brand she always wore for public events, was running in black streaks down her pale cheeks. Her perfectly styled blonde hair was limp. She was still holding her phone up, the red live icon still glowing. She was not looking at our mother. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the silent, stunned crowd, at the employees. "I didn't," she stammered, her voice a raw whisper, and then she spoke. Not to the room, but into the phone, into the live stream, to the thousands of people watching. A confession, unplanned, unscripted, and more devastating than anything I had prepared. "I didn't know," she cried, her voice breaking. I thought this dinner, I thought it was for them. I thought it was for the employees who donated. A thank you. That's what she told me. That's what I thought." Her words were a new bomb, detonating in the quiet. The employees, the ones standing by the walls, the managers at the back tables, the people who had been invited not as donors, but as window dressing for the family brand. Tessa's gaze found a group of warehouse supervisors standing near the service door, their faces hard and unreadable. "I thought we were celebrating you," she sobbed, the phone shaking in her hand. The image being broadcast to the world must have been a blur of tears and motion. "I didn't know you. I didn't know we were using you." This was the crack, the human cost. My numbers on the screen were cold. This was the blood. A hand went up. It was not a board member. It was not a donor. It was a young man at one of the back tables. Table 24, reserved for junior management. He was maybe 25. He was wearing his best, ill-fitting suit. He stood up, and his hand was not just raised, it was trembling. I make $38,000 a year," he said. His voice was not loud, but in the amplified, microphone-enhanced silence, it carried. My mic was still live. It picked up everything. He looked at Miriam. He looked at the CFO, who was still staring at the default notice. "I put $5 from every paycheck into that fund," he said, "every 2 weeks. For 2 years, I did it because one of the guys in receiving, his house burned down, and I thought I was helping him." He looked down at his plate of congealed, uninspected, and now forbidden food. "I skipped lunch some days to make sure I had that $5. And you? You bought this?" His voice cracked, not with sadness, but with a pure, sharp anger. "You bought this party, with my grocery money? For what? For this?" He swept his hand out, indicating the lavish, failed event, the rustic tablecloths, the We Are Family coasters, the donors in their expensive suits. Miriam flinched. This was not a board member she could intimidate. This was not a lawyer she could outmaneuver. This was an employee. This was the family she claimed to lead. She looked past him, past Tessa. Her eyes found mine. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, desperate bargaining. She saw the room was lost. The board was lost. She was now a hostage, and I was the one holding the terms. "Avery," she said. Her voice was low. "Just for me." But the mic picked it up. That sensitive lapel mic, it broadcast her surrender. "What do you want?" It was the question she always asked. "What is your price? What will it take to make you go away? What do you want to stop this?" I looked at her. The woman who had given me life, and then given me a performance. The woman who taught me that love was conditional and loyalty was a transaction. I unclipped the microphone from my blazer. I held it in my hand, like a priest or a judge. I did not speak to her. I turned, deliberately, to the young manager who was still standing, his eyes burning. "What I want," I said, my voice ringing out, cold, clear, and procedural, "is not the issue. What is required is..." I addressed the room, I addressed the employees. First, A full and immediate refund of every dollar donated to the Hearthline Employee Compassion Fund for the last 24 months, with interest. This will be paid from the corporate operations budget, not from any other fund. It will be on your next paycheck. I saw Kincaid, the lawyer, nod sharply, already making notes. Second, a full, public, independent audit of every executive discretionary fund, including the CEO's, to be conducted by an outside firm. The results will be published on the company's internal server for every employee to read. I looked at the CFO, every ledger, every receipt. Third, this event is over, but there will be another Thanksgiving dinner. It will be for Hearthline employees and their families only. It will be paid for by the executive bonus pool. It will be at a licensed, safe, inspected venue. And every employee who was supposed to be thanked tonight will have a seat at the table with their name on it. I took a breath. I looked back at my mother. I was done. Her face was ashen. The blood had drained away, leaving only a papery, thin mask. She finally, truly, understood that I was not a picky eater. I was not a bitter daughter. I was a structural engineer, and I had just condemned her building. She looked around the room, at the ruin of her great performance, at her crying, humiliated younger daughter, at the enraged employees, at the cold, unforgiving faces of the board. She took a half-step toward me, her hands clenching at her sides. "Avery," she hissed, a desperate, rattling sound. "You're destroying it. You're destroying everything, all of it, everything I built." I stood my ground. I did not raise my voice. I let the microphone do the work. "You built it on a faulty ledger," I said. "I'm fixing it." My words, my final verdict, echoed in the room. Marcus Thorne, who had been watching this exchange like a hawk, made his decision. He saw the path I had laid out. It was a path to containment, a way to appease the employees, satisfy the lawyers, and prevent the cross-default from triggering. It was a brutal, but clean, solution. He sat down at table 1. He pulled the document of resolution I had drafted, the one that included the terms for the refund and the audit, and placed it on the table. He took out his own heavy gold pen, the same pen he used to sign billion-dollar deals. He clicked it. Click. He signed his name, Marcus Thorne, at the bottom of the resolution. He passed it to the next board member. Sign. One by one, they signed the document that codified my demands into corporate policy. As the pen scratched across the paper, the AV tech in the back booth, now fully on my side, started a new task. He was printing. The small, high-speed laser printer in the booth whirred to life. It was printing copies of the signed resolution for the lawyers, for the auditor. The sound of the paper feeder, that mechanical, rhythmic shh-shh-shh, was the only sound in the room. It was the sound of the old order being spooled out, like a soiled, discarded tablecloth. My mother watched it all. She watched the pen move. She heard the printer. She saw me, standing in the center of her stage, holding the document that gave me her power. Slowly, deliberately, she reached up to the lapel of her designer dress. Her hand fumbled, for a moment, with the small black square of her microphone pack. She unclipped it. She held it in her hand. For a second, I thought she might throw it. But she did not. She just set it down, gently, on the podium, next to the champagne glass she had never sipped. She turned. She walked off the stage, not toward me, not toward Tessa. She walked toward the side exit, the one reserved for staff. She walked past the donors. She walked past the employees. She walked past the health inspectors. Her shoulders were straight, her head was high, but she was defeated. No one spoke. No one applauded. No one moved to stop her. Miriam Cole left the building. I stepped out onto the granite steps of Gullhaven Hall. The night air was a shock, a sudden, clean cold that cut through the lingering tension. It had started to snow, not a storm, but the first quiet, determined flakes of the season, drifting down in the halos of the tall parking lot lamps. The air no longer smelled of trapped heat and roasted meat. It smelled of pine from the surrounding woods, and the sharp, clean scent of wood smoke from a distant chimney. Behind me, in the vast lobby, the performance was over. The operational phase had begun. Marcus Thorne, a man who despised loose ends more than he despised scandal, had organized the exit. 2 long banquet tables, stripped of their red and white checked cloths, had been moved near the doors. Mr. Kincaid, the labor lawyer, stood at one. Ms. Ramirez, the auditor, stood at the other. Employees were standing in 2 long, quiet, orderly lines. They were no longer guests. They were claimants. I watched the young manager from table 24, the one who skipped lunches, reach the front. Kincaid, his voice crisp and professional, checked his name off a digital list. "Mr. Davies," Kincaid said, "here is your voucher for full restitution of all funds donated, plus 3% interest, guaranteed by the board. And here," he handed him a second card, thick and cream-colored, "is your formal invitation. Employee Thanksgiving, tomorrow, at noon, the Grayford Grand Ballroom. Your name, and a +1, are at the door." The young man took the cards. He looked at the voucher, then at the invitation. He nodded, his face grim, but not angry anymore. It was the face of a man whose grievance had been seen, validated, and settled. He turned, and as he walked past me, he caught my eye. He gave me a single, sharp nod. It was all the thanks I needed. "You won, Avery." Tessa was standing behind me. She had come out of the ballroom so silently I hadn't heard her. Her face was scrubbed raw, the makeup gone, her eyes red and swollen. She was shivering, pulling a thin wrap around her shoulders. She looked small, and for the first time in her life, unphotographable. I didn't turn to her. I kept watching the employees. "There's no winning, Tessa," I said, my voice flat. "There's just balancing the ledger. It's done." "She's still in there," Tessa whispered. I turned. I looked past her, through the tall glass panels that separated the lobby from the grand ballroom. The room was empty. The guests, the donors, the board members, gone. The lights were down, save for the single, harsh spotlight still aimed at the stage. Tessa was right. A figure was standing in it, a shadow in the center of the light. My mother. She hadn't left. She was standing exactly where I had last seen her, by the podium, next to the ruined, half-carved turkey. She was perfectly still, in her hand, hanging at her side. She was still holding the long, gleaming carving knife. She was just staring out at the 500 empty chairs, the discarded napkins, the silent microphones, a queen in an empty theater, still holding the prop from a play that had been violently canceled. I watched her for a long moment. She didn't move. I turned away from the window. The lobby was almost empty now. On the deserted Master of Ceremonies podium, forgotten by the entrance, lay a microphone. A small green light pulsed on its battery pack. Live. I walked over. I picked it up. The cool, smooth metal felt familiar in my hand. I pressed the transmit button. My voice, amplified, boomed through the high-ceilinged lobby and out the open doors, echoing across the parking lot. The last of the employees, walking to their cars, stopped. They turned back, looking toward the hall, their faces silhouetted by their headlights. "To the people who were supposed to eat first," I said. A beat of perfect, cold silence. "Happy Thanksgiving." I let the words hang in the air. And then it started. One person, the young manager, began to clap, then another, then a dozen. Within seconds, it was not applause, it was a roar, a sharp, explosive, percussive sound of validation. It wasn't gratitude, it was justice. It rolled from the steps, across the parking lot, and slammed back against the brick facade of the hall. It was the sound of 1,000 receipts being signed, 1,000 wrongs being righted, the sound of a final number, written in black ink. I held the mic for one more second, letting the sound wash over me. I looked at Tessa, her face pale in the flashing lights of the health department vehicle still parked by the kitchen. I looked at the shadow in the window, still unmoving. I looked at the employees, still clapping. I released the transmit button. I clicked the power switch. The small green light went dead. The applause was still ringing in my ears. The frame would freeze right there, on the faint, cold, and very real smile of a woman who no longer needed an invitation. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We'd love to know where you're tuning in from, so drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and if you want to support us further, hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.